Well, listen, let's start talking about Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
Talk to me about him. How much? I mean, you both played for the Braves. Was he around while you were playing, and did you have much interaction with him?
Well, interestingly enough, I was drafted in 1974. I was in high school, drafted in June of 1974 by the Braves, and my first spring training was the following spring, 75. And Hank just got traded. He broke Babe's record in April of 74, but he had just got traded to Milwaukee Brewers. So he wanted to finish his career in Milwaukee, and the Braves accommodated him. So we didn't cross paths until he came back to the Braves and started working in the front office. And his primary assignment was development within the Braves minor league system. But by that time, I was in the major leagues. So, but our paths did cross very often, and probably more so even since I was retired. But his spirit, his legacy, and the kind of person he was just kind of permeated the whole Braves organization. It's kind of like if you're going to be a member of the Atlanta Braves, here's a man who did it the right way through very many challenges. This is how you need to be, and he was just a really unique and special human being for sure.
Is there a bond between outfielders that you felt with him?
I think so. He was very respectful working in the front office of our hitting coaches. He didn't ever come down there unless he was invited to talk to the players about hitting, because, he had his responsibilities and he didn't want to step on the toes of our hitting coaches. But there were times when our hitting coaches said, "Hank, come down here and talk to Murph. try to get this kid squared away." And so I think mostly our bond is from being at home plate and trying to hit. I mean, I wish I could have come close to the kind of hitter Hank was, but he did try to help us out occasionally.
What would you say? I mean, because you had your heyday with the Braves as well. I think, what was it, 398 career home runs, and so many of those with the Braves. And then, of course, he with the 755 career. But if you had to qualify, or at least identify, what made him such a great hitter, what would you say that is?
Well, a lot of times home run hitters are bigger. They're a little taller. They have a little more leverage just in the mechanics of the swing. Just because of your size, you hit the ball and it's going to go further than an athlete that's smaller in stature. But not with Hank. I'm not sure how tall Hank was, 6 foot or so, but you can look at some of the highlights. And of course, he started very skinny. I think he might have been an infielder. What was remarkable about him was from his elbows down, his forearms and his hands. There was just nobody that had that strength and that quickness that Hank had. And I think Don Drysdale, they said, "How do you pitch to Hank Aaron?" And he said, "Just make sure no one's on base when he hits a home run." A career 300, over 300 average. And I don't even know how many years he played, over 20 all-star teams. He was so consistent. You take away 3,000 hits is a Hall of Fame career. You take away his 755 home runs, and he still has over 3,000 hits. I mean, he led the world in everything at the time he retired. And as far as I'm concerned, he is truly still the home run king.
As I'm reading the New York Times piece, I don't know if you saw it. They described the racial atmosphere, not only in baseball, but in the country at the time. And I'm just shocked that he received so much pushback and so much, it's not, I guess pushback isn't really even the right word, but so much negative attention. just because of the color of his skin. I mean, how can that be? Can you explain that to me? How can that be such a, I mean, such a national treasure and an icon like that in professional sports? How is it that that kind of thing was still happening even when he was playing?
Well, that's a great question, Bob. I wish I had the answer because it is incomprehensible to me. I know there's racial prejudice everywhere. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and was mostly oblivious to any challenges that especially the Deep South was going through during those times. But we saw throughout the civil rights era where there were a lot of problems, and we still have those problems, Bob. We all know that. But it was eye-opening to me to think that I graduated in high school in 1974. Hank broke Babe Ruth's record in 1974, and it was the year leading up to that time was described by him as the worst year of his life. Um, it's incomprehensible. I don't know how to say why it is, but it existed. It was overt back then, much more so. Not that African American players don't face discrimination nowadays, but during the 60s and 70s, Hank couldn't stay at the same hotel as any of the other African American players, couldn't eat at the same restaurants, and then he ends up being the best baseball player in the history of the world. Um, Now, there are arguments about who is the best hitter. A lot of people say Ted Williams and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. And, I just, I always say you add the degree of difficulty. It's Hank Aaron. There's no question. And death threats to him and his family throughout the chase of Babe Ruth. Uh, it's hard to comprehend, but it exists and it's there. And he tried to set the example. He did set the example for all of us how to handle hate is with grace and dignity, and that's the way he lived.
Um, all of this happened, and I mean, your amazing career, his incredible career, all happened prior to steroids in Major League Baseball. And still, I mean, he stands out like this shining star in that sky, and I just he must have been. How do you describe just being? I mean, the aura of him preceded him. It must have into every room. I mean,
Yeah, it did. It did, and as I said earlier, our paths didn't cross while the last couple of years of his career, and I was in the National League, and so most of my time was spent with him after he retired. He was retired, and when I was retired, and that's the perfect way to say it, Bob. Is there was an aura, an aura. You felt something that you were in the presence of somebody, just not only a great player, but who had just an incredible amount of dignity and peace within himself. And after he was done playing, he worked for civil rights, equality, and scholarships for kids. I mean, what he did will live forever. Not only are great memories of him as a ball player, but as a human being, and taking what he had and giving it all to many communities, but especially Atlanta. What he did was remarkable.
So if you had to sum up the man and the athlete, how would you do that? How would you describe that in terms of today's world of baseball and today's professional sports, today's society? How would you sum up the life and the legacy of Hank Aaron?
I would say he was a combination of grace, dignity, and excellence, not only as a player, but that's the way he played. You watched him, didn't bring attention to himself, and all of a sudden ended up hitting 755 home runs. And that's the way he was off the field. And those are really hard things to do under normal circumstances. But when you go throughout your career with hatred directed towards you, you know, to understand how he coped with that and continued to work for the good of his community and of his fellow man. He lived the way he played, with grace, dignity, and excellence.
Is there anything else I haven't asked you that you want to share with us in regard to this legend that we have lost?
I you know, I've just spent all day talking about him, and I guess the main thing I can say is that and thinking about him and thinking about how lucky, Nancy and I and our family to be in the same room as him at times, to play for the same organization as he did, to shake his hand and feel of his unique spirit. Very thankful.